You are watching TheArtsinHeart, your home of authentic conversations.
Good evening, Elizabeth. Thank you for coming to The Perspective, and we're more than privileged to have you here. We are discussing adoption in terms of transracial adoption. And why is this an important subject to discuss in the first place? And for that fact, can you tell us what is adoption in the first place?
I think I start off with adoption. First of all, thank you very much for having me, and also for for this interview. Let me first of all go into the definition of adoption. Adoption, anybody can adopt. Let's say you can also go back home and you decide in here, for example, in Europe, you can bring your parents here and adopt them as well, and you live with them here. But you're seeing we are bringing people that we know there is a relationship already there that has been found, and there is a reason why we're bringing them over. So very many times we've seen people adopt for very different reasons. When we look at our setup back home, we used to have parents taking over other people's children from their siblings when somebody was dead, and they would take them up. We never called it adoption. It was part of our culture. Because if those are your nieces and nephews, you cannot walk the street and you know that your nieces and nephews are not being catered for because their parents are dead. So we're taking those things as part and parcel of our culture of taking those people up with us. We're taking them in our environment. That means the children are growing, knowing where the cultures is not something strange. Our rules and regulations, which is common to this community, which is common to the family, they're familiar with. Now, when we look at different setups, and I want to first of all start with the Black people, you see people who have maybe been married and have the desire to have children, but by the virtue of the fact that they may not be in the position biologically to give birth to children, they may decide to adopt a child. And this adoption is actually an advantage in the sense that there may be a child out there that urges to have a family, and there is a parent out here that has the urge to have a child. So when you're looking at this setup, it is an amicable thing. It is helping the other, and it is also helping the other person. So it means both people are helping each other in the sense that there is this, we want to love one another. We want to experience this love because we human beings have been made to share love, right? So now we're looking at that setup that we are now, you're going up there and you're adopting a child that looks like yourself.
Well, Elizabeth, that's quite informative. However, let's put it into conceptualizing in terms of we are here in Europe, and most of us, as evident, we're Black. But we've seen a lot of white families adopting in Africa, Asia, and all those Caucasian families. Why is it becoming very interesting for the white families, if I put it, to adopt from Africa for that matter?
Well, the interest is not new, in actual fact. White people have been adopting children for the longest period of time that they were in that continent. So it is not new. What is new is the open discussions that we're having about questioning about these adoptions. Because we've seen a lot of setbacks. We've seen a lot of trauma around the parents that were predominantly white went and adopted a Black child. Because we're looking at the fact that these parents may be racists, yeah, but they don't have problems adopting a child. So that is where the question is: what are their interests? What is the background that they have?
That's interesting. If I cut you short, Elizabeth, because during one of the sessions that was very informative, we mentioned about the price tag that is attached to these children.
And it says if you adopt a child in Germany, a child that was born in Germany, it's about 100 to 200 euros. And if you adopt one not inside Europe, it's about 10,000 to 15,000 euros.
White.
So people actually go out that way to spend so much money just to have a little Black child. It's almost like saying I want a little Chihuahua because I look rich with it.
Is this like a trophy being harvested from Africa and saving the world?
Well, there is a gentleman in that I follow. He's a modern. He calls himself the modern warrior, and also another people that I follow from New Zealand. Now they tabled an issue and said, "Is this not the modern slavery? The white man who always have wanted to own the black person. Is it not another form of fetishizing the black body, the black skin? Is it not another, I'm fulfilling this, the dream of owning somebody, and I buy them? Isn't the African person was always been bought, right?" Ivana spoke something very, very important about this, going out and putting a price tag to these children. And fact is that when I am going out and I'm looking to adopt a child, I'm going to bring this child. The child may be coming with a name, yeah. But I go out and I change the name of this child. And the same thing when I go out to buy a dog or a cat, and I go to a dog pound and I buy a dog. And the dog may have had their own names, but the dog is coming new to our family. So what do? They normally change the name of the dog. So we have never moved, when you look at it in terms of being rehabilitated from being the black cattle to being a human being. That is what these two people were saying. And it is interesting that when you look at it, it really strikes a core in the heart. Because is that not at the end of the day something that could be in that direction of why do they leave children in their own countries that need to be adopted, but make their ways to go out and adopt a black child?
Let me get back on the issue of change of names, Elizabeth. And it's interesting because we all know that during marriage, of course, partners will choose to change names if they agree on that. But changing a child's name because it's easier to pronounce, what is the most difficult step? Adopting or pronouncing the name?
Well, we're looking at power dynamics. The power dynamics is that white people by default must always do things the way they want. It is their right. And if you tell them that I don't think it is right, the first thing is they're going to tell you, that is my right. I have the right. You can't take away the rights. They come in, the laws are going to be put out on you, and they're going to say, yes, this is my right to change the name of the child. So we're looking at what power dynamics are here. They are at the top, and they are the ones who are going to decide. So you, as a person who is black, do not have another choice. And remember, some of these children, like the one with the Ugandan case, that was a very tragic one because the mother never wanted the child to be adopted to begin with. It was a money issue, but she never knew that the child was going to be taken away forever. Neither did the child know that the child was going to be taken away from them forever. So we're looking at, is it just a monitoring issue that we are trying to, we have the money, and like I now look at Madonna, I have the money, why not? I would use it that way. Why not? Who is going to stop me? The country is poor. They need the money. I do it.
I want to talk more about the name issue and what is in the power of the name. But we had a guest in one of the sitting, and she mentioned something about her name and how it was being played ping pong during her school years. We're going to get back after the break, and we're going to talk to our guest. What is her name again? Caroline, who is with us here on The Perspective.
When we arrived there, my brothers and sisters, they've got almost the same skin color like me. Mm-hmm. Because their father was just a mix, he wasn't a full white. Mm-hmm. But because of the surname, it was also in Africa, if you have a surname that sounded white, you have the privilege. You have the privilege. And I had my mother's surname. So I was shown the difference between my own brothers and sisters. Wow.
My name is Gillian from My Ethnic Cooking and Catering in Frankfurt. For today's Valentine's Day special, I'm going to show you how to prepare kuku wa kushonwa. That's a specialty well known around the Kenyan coast and Tanzania. So I'd like to give you back to the studio and welcome and enjoy a lovely evening of Valentine's Day. Thank you very much.
You are watching TheArtsinHeart, your home of authentic conversations.
The guys who went, including my shosh, they go and they find my dad lying down there in a pool of blood, dead. Really, it was so horrible. Like, my dad was a fighter. He tried to fight back, but the guys overwhelmed him. So he was hit, he was cut severely on the head, on the back. So there he was. I can tell you, my dad was taken to the morgue. People used to go to the morgue. There's a day during those visiting days, I reached, like that day I said, I've gathered courage, I have to see my dad. I went, go to Kakamega mortuary. At the gate, I couldn't. I came back home again. The time he's dying, it is the time I was going to do exams. So they had to postpone to hold on the burial so that I finish the exam first before they proceed with the burial. So I'm there doing my second term exam, the one that I was supposed, if I pass, I go with my dad to Nairobi, and the person who was supposed to take me to Nairobi is lying lifeless in a mortuary somewhere.
My name is Ambassador Tom Amolo, and you're watching TheArtsinHeart. Lovely programming.
And indeed, you're watching The Perspective. This is on TheArtsinHeart, the home of authentic conversation. Tonight, we have Caroline here with us, discussing the power in a name in all these rationale called adoption, racial or transracial adoption. Caroline, you've suffered through the period of apartheid, and one thing that stood out was your name, especially your surname.
Yes.
Tell us something about your experiences.
We actually experienced firsthand apartheid. I grew up in part of it.
Yeah.
And right now, when I think I actually got trauma. So some of these things also people should also organize. Maybe we should have therapies.
Yeah.
So people can actually, because the experiences are not just something we're discussing here, okay, like, but they're deep. They cut deep. Because I remember my mother then got married to somebody of another race.
Yeah.
And I wasn't of the same race. And so that was the difference. So my surname was my mom's surname, which was then typical African surname. And then my brothers and sisters that my mom got later, then they had their father's surname, which was then the English surname. So I was then taken as African and they were taken as coloreds, which are then the second level from the citizenship in apartheid. And apparently then my mom and my stepfather then divorced, and goodness, our country that time had the social system. So we were taken by social worker as children, then we were parents that have divorced, and then were put in a children's home. Apparently this children's home was extra-gate for colored children, that was the terminology given to the mixed children who are supposed to be born from white and black. And some of them marry each other and then they carry on, but then they'll always be recognized as coloreds, as the second citizenship in the step of whatever. We were blacks down, the coloreds in the middle, and then the whites at the top. And so when we got there, it was time for us to go to school. I was around, I think, grade 3. And so my brothers, they could go to school because they had the surname. So obviously they were in the colored area, they qualified to go to the colored school. So they went to school and I stayed. So I couldn't go to school. So there was a big discussion. And as a child, I didn't know, but I know I just had this yearning of wanting to go to school. And I still remember I was around 7, 8, and every time everybody else came home from school, because we're near the school, so you'd see all the children, even those that were going down to their homes. I used to stand at the gate, and then walk with everybody back to the house, and then they would do their homework, take off their school shoes, all these tasks and things they were doing. I really yearned to do them. I felt I needed to do it. I really wanted to belong. But nobody spoke to me. Nobody explained to me. So I was just there, just knowing, okay, I'm not allowed to go to school. But exactly why, I wasn't sure. And then eventually 2 terms went. So every day I was at home. And the second term of the school year, then I was allowed to go to school. Do you know what joy is that for a small girl? And I think I didn't even think of anybody who did anything bad. I was just happy to go to school. Then I got to the school, the headmaster called me on the side and he told me, he said, right, you are not going to use this surname, you are going to use the surname that your other brothers and sisters use. Okay, that means I wasn't officially adopted, but I think it was after all these discussions, whoever was involved, the welfare and whoever, they had come to agreement to say, okay, there's no way out. We will just let this child go to school using this name. So for me to be able to go to that school, it was just this name. So when it was agreed that I used the name and I was made to understand that I used this name, I qualified to go to the school.
That is the classic example of power dynamics when it comes to the adoption aspect. Would you say your stepfather then, I hope he's still there, played a role in you getting admitted or probably agitating for you getting a space in that school?
No, he didn't play a role because he was not there. He had left the family, was somewhere else. We were under the children's home. Child welfare. So it was the child welfare that was responsible for us. And then we had to be put together because the great-grandmother that was looking after me couldn't anymore. She was very old. That was my mother's grandmother. So the social welfare was forced now to keep us children together. But then we face the situation now that I'm going to have to live with them, but I'm classified under apartheid situation that I'm African. I'm not supposed to be with them. There was always the separation by race. And sometimes it wasn't the race because of the color. It was the race also now came down to the name. So if I had a name that was clean, sounding English, then I would qualify.
You could opt to change your race.
Sometimes some people did opt to change their names, their surnames, and as long as they changed their surnames, they could go even to look for employment in certain places and they would qualify. So for me now, it was then, I think after this discussion, long discussion back and forth, I think with the schools and with all the authorities, I think it was then decided, okay, this is the way. Because I only discovered when I got to the school that the headmaster told me to use the surname. Okay, as a kid, I didn't think about it. I was just happy to go to school. And okay, my brothers and sisters used the surname, so I used it. It was not official. That is why when I was then in the grade 7 and I had to go to high school, which meant in high school, because you're going to need your certificates, and the certificates have to go along with your birth certificate and everything. So the surname on my birth certificate had to be used. The headmaster then reminded me that, so now you're going to high school, you're going to use this name. You know, he actually said this name, he pointed, he didn't call it out. You know, I think for him it was also probably disgusting. I'll just put it in a mild way, that he should say this name. So until I went to high school, then I carried on. It was even pronounced so drastically. It was pronounced badly. All the times I was
Kindly tell us your name.
My mother's surname was Chiani, which was spelled Tshiyiane. And then someone said Tisiani, Chichani. I had it said all because people, when it's a name that people look up, down upon, especially when we're talking in racial terms, it's for them, they don't take care about how they say it. You know, it's just said anyhow, and it doesn't matter. You know, whereas some people will be very particular. If I say somebody in German, their surname very wrongly or pronounce it, they will repeat it until I get it.
Awesome. Let's talk about the power of a name and what lies in the name, and that is identity. Is this something that parents are adopting from, let's say, African nations? Their children will end up suffering identity crisis. How was it for you growing up?
That's a good question. It's tough. I mean, we've talked already about identity crisis, and that's definitely something everyone has to go through, whether born here or not. At some point, you just, you really fight with yourself. Who am I? What am I? What am I going to be in the future, especially? And then just growing up from small onwards, it's even worse because you go home, you have this, culture at home that you're raised with because that's what your family does, everything you do. But as soon as you step out and you talk to white people, Germans generally, you're like, oh, you don't do that? Oh, okay. What, your parents react like that when you say that? Oh, okay, you can talk to your parents like this, you can do this. It's just a whole different world out there, literally. which you have to really, be aware of. And especially if now I had the luck that I got introduced to my roots. So I would fly back to Africa. Luck, I would say, because if you go home, you're not African enough for them, right? So you go there and you talk, you're like, why are you talking like this? Well, I was raised in Europe. Oh, so you're not really African. I am. Okay, you come here, you talk as a European, they'll be like, oh wow, you speak good German. Yeah, I was born and raised here. But still, your German is good, okay? And you're not white enough for them or European enough. They remind you that you're Africa. But you go to Africa, they remind you you're European. So you're just stuck in the middle and ask yourself, so what am I? Who am I? Right? So you just need to find this good balance of yourself, knowing who you are, but still trying to adapt to the system here. Yeah.
How about school? Was school good enough, or was it a tough process for you, especially the lower level of school?
It was definitely tough, very tough.
How many girls or guys hung on your hair? Hey, can I touch your hair?
All the time, not just the kids, the teachers too. Kindergarten teachers, primary teachers. I think throughout my whole school life, except university, thank God, because they don't touch you, which sounds wrong, but yeah, it would always, people just do it passively, just passing. Sometimes they don't even ask. They just, you just feel somebody just going through your hair, and you're like, what's that? For us, you don't really get used to it. You never get used to it, but it's almost normal. But then you still ask yourself, how come I never pass somebody's hair and be like, I want to touch it, And then every time they ask, can I touch your hair while the hand is already in your hair? So you cannot even really reply, because I'm like, well, your hand is already in there, so what do you want me to say? And then sometimes I used to tell people like, you're allowed to touch my hair when I feel the need of touching your hair. And then they'll just look at you and you're like, I'm good, maybe later. I'm good, maybe later. So yeah, and well, especially for me, I grew up in a Catholic school. Well, I was in a Catholic kindergarten, and then I went to a Catholic primary school, which you would think should be the safest space, with God's love to raise in, but that was actually the most toughest place to actually raise in. That's where I experienced, I think, most racism ever. Even growing up, they would always declare German as my second language, not as my first language, My mom taught me actually when I was 6 to speak English. So my first language throughout growing up is German. I still sometimes just think in German. So it sometimes takes time for me to talk because my head keeps on translating everything. But people assume because of my color and because of my mother that German is just not in me, So yeah, growing up I had a lot of racial problems. My teacher is not really accepting me, even though I was just like any other child, just a different language, just a different color.
Sometimes people will question that, a lot of Africans feel they actually have no advantage being in Europe. Do you believe that's a misinformed sort of thinking? And how can we reverse that thinking that it's not a privilege to be here, rather it's an opportunity?
Definitely research, and I think also it's also on our side. It's our fault too, because I know a lot of us Black people like to show off, saying, oh, I'm in Europe. Europe is nice. Look at me in this nice car, but not saying it's maybe secondhand, or I'm actually just borrowing it right now with a car house, just checking out the car, but not really driving it, So it's us really showing a wrong picture of where we're living. Because I understand people want to show off that, they're not anywhere where they used to be. But I think it's important to just state facts. There's nothing wrong with, living in small apartments that are really nice. When I go home, I always tell my family, you're living the life. And they're like, what do you mean you're in Europe? I say, so what? You've got a house, a pool, I don't know how many cars. We literally live in a nice, cute apartment with a car that we need for the whole family that we share, which is good enough for us, but it's not what they expect us to live in Europe.
You are watching TheArtsinHeart, your home of authentic conversations.
You find that they're supposed to implement the law, and they don't implement the law. And my feeling, and a very strong view as a Kenyan, and I said it earlier on, we must implement the law to the letter. Without fear, without intimidation, we need men and women of courage. To do that, then you see a very different case.
today we are going to do the soul food table grill cooking. Because as you may already know, people think barbecue or grilling was invented by I don't know who, but I have to mention that our forefathers, former slaves, are the ones who created grilling. And today we are going to do it at the table because we don't have a wonderful weather outside. So we'll do table grill today.
You are watching TheArtsinHeart, your home of authentic conversations.
And yes, indeed, welcome back. I can see our chef, Jill, is here. She's going to talk to us about the soul food and the history behind it from ethnic cookings, right?
My ethnic cooking.
My ethnic cooking. So
Yes.
good evening and welcome to The Perspective.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you definitely for answering the call to be here. Tell us something about the soul food and why you are so much passionate about foods and our traditions with foods as Africans.
I like talking about soul food because it is a misconception by many people. Like, I had an incident in a German restaurant where the person proudly called it soul food. And I was asking him, would you please explain to me what soul food is all about? And I got an answer like, that is food for the soul, it's food for happiness. Then I had to explain to him that it's a misconception because soul food was invented by our ancestors, especially the Black American slaves who were in the southern part of America, especially in the direction of South Carolina. And most of these people, they had to invent soul food so that to be happy in this new place. Because you can imagine these people, some of them were sold off from their homes or kidnapped or misplaced, taken forcefully away from their homes to this strange country. You have to find out what kind of food do I have here? What should I eat? How do I adapt to this? And some of them, they had to combine and try to create the different foods. And what made it even worse is that the slave masters were giving them leftovers or giving them meat that was rotten, meat that was not good quality. So instead of staying hungry, they had to be creative and they had to create a meal out of it. So we all love spare ribs. When you go to an American restaurant or any restaurant, you talk about spare ribs. We talk about chicken nuggets or chicken wings. But then somebody would say, okay, the soul food has a lot of sugar, it has a lot of spices. But nobody asked themselves, why did this come about? So you find that when the slaves were being given the spare ribs, they had to spice it up. They had to add some sugar, especially if the spare rib was a bit rotten. You have to eat it. So you had to marinate it for some time in the spices, put a bit of sugar. And then when you cook it, it was very tasty. And now we are at the present generation, or at the present moment, we are eating the most spare ribs with a lot of meat on it. If you think of the spare ribs in those days, it didn't have any meat on it. Yeah, so people are just chewing on bones or something. And I like to bring out the story on soul food so that people are aware that even us in the diaspora, we have to think of our soul food. Because in my case, I started the first African cooking school in Germany. And the issue that I always have is to import food from home or import seeds from home. Because when you import seeds from home, you get to the German customs authority. And in most cases, they've always destroyed my food. Because it does not fit to the German norm. It could kill, it could finish the race here or something. Yeah, I've had my food burnt on 2 occasions. I just get a letter telling me, sorry, we are not going to deliver your package. We have destroyed it because it does not fit to the German consumption. This is what states in the letter. So as also in the diaspora, we have to create our own soul food. If I want to cook food like mokimo, you know the Kenyan mokimo where we take potatoes. Okay, although potatoes was a colonial food which was brought in by the British colonials. We created also our own food from it. So we have the potatoes. We have, in Germany, I will use spinach leaves, but in Kenya, we use pumpkin leaves. So it's not easy to get pumpkin leaves in Germany unless you wait until October to harvest as many pumpkin leaves as you can and freeze it or something. So these are some of the things I was thinking. You can import it, plant it, and then keep it frozen or something, but it's not allowed to import such things because it's not fit for the German consumption. You know, so here in the diaspora, we've created our own soul food. We have to improvise. Instead of using white corn for making ugali, I'm using yellow corn for making ugali. Yeah. So potatoes, sweet potatoes. In Kenya, we have white sweet potatoes. I came here, I found the orange one. In my case, the first time I saw the orange sweet potato, I thought somebody colored it or something, the culture shock behind it. So I think soul food applies to all of us from Africa, from the Caribbean. We come here into Europe and we have to create our own food to replace what we are missing back at home.
Awesome. Spices are some of the things you love in your food. And some of us relate with them because when you smell them, you smell the soils from our lands. What role do they play in your cookery?
For me, they play a big role because I use spices as medicine. Especially like if you look like the common spice as turmeric, if you look at turmeric, it was brought in by the Indians. The Indians were brought into Kenya during the colonial period to build the railway line from Mombasa to Kampala, and they brought in the spices. So if you look at our Kenyan dishes, there's a combination of Indian and Kenyan spices. Kenyans, we had a lot of what are the kroita? What is kroita in English? Herbs. Kenya, in our original food, we had a lot of herbs, but after colonialism, we also started getting different spices and got mixed up. So spices like turmeric is important for me because it helps in inflammation cases, but not the powdered turmeric. If you take the real root and use it, like you can mix it in your tea and stuff like that, it's a healthy benefit. Things like ginger, it's a healthy benefit. Things like turmeric is also found in curry powder, so I can't speak much about it. And then we have spices like chili,
Garlic.
Yes. If you look at the red chili, I mostly use it especially in wintertime because it has some vitamins and it also keeps your body warm. Yeah, people just think you feel it's chilly, but actually it helps to keep your body warm. So I always like to use spices also as a health benefit. Sometimes you don't really need to take medicine to heal yourself or to prevent sicknesses. You can actually just deal with spices in your daily life and you're good to go. And it's a more natural way to treat yourself than use chemical.
I want to talk about your friend there, Mr. Daniels. And there's something you mentioned during one of the presentations you're doing, and it really sparkled me. For those who do not know about that guy.
Yeah, for me, a few days ago, as we kept on doing research with the Race Think dinner, I somehow stumbled on Google and I found out that Jack Daniels was not made by Jack Daniels. It was actually made by a slave called Nathan Green, he was just experimenting making drinks, and there's some honey in it, there's some ginger in it, and some what else? I've forgotten the ingredients. So this guy made the Jack Daniels, but that time the slave owner took the recipe and put it under his name. So nobody even knew that Nathan Green was the slave who invented or who has the recipe for Jack Daniels. The whole world, we've all known Jack Daniels belongs to Jack Daniels, but it's actually Nathan Green was a Ghanaian slave, and he brought this recipe from Ghana. And after speaking to some of my Ghanaian Nana, she confirmed that the ingredients in Jack Daniels is part of their drinks back at home. They also didn't know.
Interesting, because you see, over time, we've seen a scenario whereby the white supremacy is tending to write off the gains that the African people have done. And being in Germany and the work you guys are doing, what is your message to the rest of the white community?
For me, talking from the side of food, my message is that Germany is not only for white Germans. We are also here. As black as I am, I also have a German passport. They should also integrate our foods. They should not just say that food from Africa is poisonous or seeds from Africa is poisonous. So that's why I'm trying to make our people aware. There's some people when they taste African food, they're like, oh, it's edible. I'm like, what did you think? I mean, our foods are edible. So I'm trying to, for me, my purpose is I prefer having cooking classes than a restaurant. I prefer having cooking classes so that people see what you're using is actually more organic than their own foods. Mm-hmm. And so that they can appreciate our foods and see, oh, these guys, their foods are healthy. It's not as people, like there's some people who tell me, why did you start an African cooking class? We cannot eat your foods. These foods are not fit for consumption. Such comments, But I'm like, simple. You can even come to my cooking class for free. and I show you exactly how our foods look like, you know. And from this point of view, slowly by slowly, I'm also getting invited to go give lessons and give introductions to our African dishes. And I always try to go as traditional as possible. It's also highly dependent on how or where I get the ingredients. So I just try to make them know how important. Like if you take pumpkin leaves prevents cancer. It's that simple.
Oh, really?
It prevents cancer.
They're eating a lot of them starting tonight.
Yes. Yeah, so I mean, those are some of the healthy benefits that we have in our own vegetables that people here cannot imagine. How can you eat pumpkin leaves? It's simply you don't know how to prepare it, but it's edible. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, that is Chef Jill, I'll call her, with such amazing information about these foods that actually make health benefits to us. This is The Perspective, and of course, you can catch this program every single Thursday right here on The Arts in Heart on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
You are watching Art in Heart, your home of authentic conversations.
So the narrative that we as Africans have to push, is what I call the affirmative African narrative. What is the affirmative African narrative? Is that you're intrinsically yourself good. You have to carry yourself as an African. You should not second guess yourself to the extent that you begin changing your skin color. You begin changing your hair because you want to look in a different way, because you strongly believe that if you undermine who you are, then you become a better version of who somebody else is.
You are watching Art in Heart, your home of authentic conversations.
How do we demystify the culture effect, Elizabeth, and how do we maintain our culture as Africans in foreign lands?
Well, maintaining your culture in a foreign land is first of all accepting who you are and where you've come from, and also accepting that what the white man told you, that your culture was inferior, was never the truth. As a matter of fact, every other thing that has been taken from the white person or people has always come from us. Yeah. So it cannot be that our culture was that bad, because when it comes to the medicine, we are the people that founded the medicine. Yeah. When I look at the arthritic medicine from South Africa, which they went in and they took from the San people, they came in here and they made it for themselves. Yeah? So we need to go back and look at why is it important for me to know my culture, because even the Germans value their cultures. They've never given it up. They've only used their powers to force us to assimilate in their cultures. So we need to de-assimilate, like the way Chimamanda Adichie says, out of this and go and look and embrace our own cultures, because there's absolutely nothing wrong. As a matter of fact, those are very beautiful cultures. Yeah, it's a culture that is really one that is communal, one that looks at the benefit or the goodwill of everybody within that community. That is also how our languages are also structured, as a communal, whereas the white people's languages are very individualistic. It is always me and me and me. And when it goes out, it goes maybe to my wife or maybe my husband, my boat, and then my car. But we've been very communal. Our languages are also very communal. We don't talk always in the me, me, me. We always tend to use the we form. So I think embracing our culture is very important, that we look at why aren't we speaking the language? Why am I not embracing the language? Or why am I, what is the issues that I have with myself and my culture? Overcome them and start anew with yourself, because this is going to be a wonderful journey of embracing something that you have always denounced for no reasons at all.
How do we propel the African narrative in a foreign land?
This is a very good question that I've seized to want to propel the African narrative here, because the African narrative here was way ahead of us being here. In 1884, they sat at the Congo Conference, or what is called as the Berlin Conference, and divided this country. So we really don't need to propel these African narratives here at all. As a matter of fact, all this has been built at the backbones of people that look like ourselves. So we don't really need that. It is, as a matter of fact, supposed to be the other way around. They should propel the African narratives, not we. We've done enough. We've built their roads, we've built their schools, we've given them their economy, we've given them their freedom. They should now come back and propel and say how they are grateful that we did this. And maybe also look at the topic on reparations and apologies.
Well, what a tough note to end this conversation. We are more than privileged to have you, Miss Elizabeth, on set, and of course your guests that came here. In case you missed out, you can always follow on their social channels that we are streaming right underneath right now. And without forgetting, we have Chef Jill, I will call her, and the little Lily White. That's my name for her. Elizabeth, of course, and Caroline, all the way from Zimbabwe, now a resident here in Germany. Until next time, this is The Perspective. My name is Likuyani Eli. Good night.
Thank you.